Over 8 months ago, I did a video with some dry beans that I cooked and then freeze-dried and rehydrated. I'll leave a link to it in case you want to go back and see it. And I said I was going to be working on another video or some other videos trying the beans in different ways to help keep them whole during that process. Well, I'm finally getting around to doing some of the editing of that. Cooking the beans and then freeze drying them and then being able to use them very, very rapidly definitely work. However, I kind of sucked at it. Now we got to figure out how to cook them properly so that it works for whole beans. Okay, stay tuned for canned ones and better cooked ones. Real quick, we're going to start a little test with some more dry beans. So just like the last set of dry beans, these are also the small red kidney beans, but I'm trying different amounts of salt in the water for soaking and cooking. I read an article saying that if you soak and cook in a certain amount of salt, that they tend to not blow apart as much. So we're going to do a little test on that. So I've got 6 containers with 6 different amounts of salt, and one has some sugar in it. I'm not adding any acids to it this time, tomatoes or vinegar or anything else. So we'll do that on another test. So let's get these started. I have 6 samples. Each set of these had 100 grams of dry beans and 300 grams of water. And then this one had no salt, half teaspoon of salt, 1 teaspoon of salt, 2 teaspoons of salt, 3 teaspoons of salt, and then 2 teaspoons of salt and 2 teaspoons of sugar. Now, so far, it looks like these are the largest beans. So they've soaked up the most water so far. I'm going to drain each sample, weigh them, put them into one of these containers, add water back in it to the same concentration of salt and or sugar that we had, and cook them in the oven. I don't have enough ramekins to do them all at once the same way, so I've got 2 other containers that I'm using, but they're all going to go in the oven at the same time, basically. We'll start with this one. Go ahead and drain it out. Tear that out. And that's 214 grams. Since some of these containers are slightly different, we'll make sure we tear it out each time. 7, so that's a few grams less. Now these look much more of them whole. 201, that looks much better. A couple of breaking apart ones. 197, 194. And finally, the one with the sugar and the salt, 195. So that one's very similar to the 3 teaspoons of salt. And I'm going to put them in the oven at 225 and just let them simmer slowly for a few hours, and we'll check them. Okay, so I'm adding 200 grams of water the second time. I think that's going to be enough water. To recap, this is the order I have them on there. No salt, half teaspoon, teaspoon, 2 teaspoons, 3 teaspoons, 2 teaspoons of salt, 2 teaspoons of sugar. I'm going to leave these sitting in this same positions. So these will go in the oven now, and I only have it at 225, so it'll take a good long time. So we'll be back in a couple hours or so to check it.
Yeehaw!
So this is just step 1. I need to do another set after I figure out which ones are best at this step of salt. Then I want to try some with an acid. So lemon juice, tomato, vinegar, something that adds an acid, because that will keep it from softening at all. And I've done that with chili where I've put the tomato in way too early, and that was a big problem because then it never really got soft. So we'll check the next step on this later. I'm just looking for how they come out after freeze drying. Do they stay relatively whole? So, and you can see the less salt that's in it, the more came out of the beans and into the liquid. So by the time we get to these, they have a lot less stuff in the liquid. And the beans are more firm and seem to be more whole, but they're also pretty salty. I haven't rinsed them or anything. That might be an important step, but the texture's good. And then this one's half salt and half sugar. And that seems very good without being as salty. Okay, I'll put them back in here. We'll see them again tomorrow. So these have been sitting in the refrigerator for about 20 hours. I'm going to go ahead and drain each one of these samples and put them in these pans for pre-freezing. So we'll put one on each side of the divider, the little 3D printed dividers that I've made. And I've mentioned those a few times. They're just ones that I made to fit the pans. And then I also have a video of making ones without using a 3D printer. So I'm going to go ahead and drain these, and I'll again track it with the labels so that I keep track of them. I just drained them out, gave them a quick rinse, and then I'll put them in the pans for pre-freezing. And they're going to be pretty high on here, but it's still a small amount. And then when we're finished, we'll be able to see if there's any difference in the amount of broken ones versus whole ones, depending on salt levels. I honestly don't know if salt levels will make any difference. That one's the 1 teaspoon of salt. All of these varieties now. Do you want to try one of each? Now these are going to the freezer for pre-freezing, and they'll get to the freeze dryer eventually, so we'll see these later. Back before Thanksgiving, I was working on some experiment with some beans. That's the previous scene for you, but it's mid-April now. These have been sitting in the freezer, kind of forgotten, and I'm gonna take care of them finally. So this batch won't be really full because I'm not going to worry about filling it up. I just want to get these out of the freezer, see what happens with them. And of course it's going to be skewed to some extent because they've been sitting for all this time. There's tray 2. I'm going to put these on the middle 2 spaces because they're the most consistent for temperature. And I'll keep these tags with them. So I'll be able to track it, and let's see if this will even stay together to get them out of the pans. I do not know, because again, this has been a long time sitting around. Okay. I have a total of 6. I can use 2 trays and do 3 on each. And I'll put something on one of the other trays. There's one of them. It's going to be a strange little batch. And the current weight with those tags and everything, 1365 in tray 2. And these were all about the beans staying together during rehydration. Tray 3, and the trays were in the freezer so that I don't warm up these things. And there's no way I can get a thermometer in that without breaking things apart. And for this, I don't want that to happen. I can put it alongside, I just don't know if that will be of any value. Got some blocks of yogurt that have been in the freezer also for some period of time. I didn't date it because I was going to do it right away, so I don't know how long it's been there. So these aren't going to make anything close to a full batch, but I'm not really worried about that. I just want to get this test finished because it was started maybe 5 months ago. Let's get them in there and get them finished. So we'll come back when that is about finished or ready for the dry check. So don't go away, it'll be just a second. This batch of beans and yogurt says that it's done. Actually, it said it was time to take it out and check it about 3 hours ago. And that's with an 11 or 12 hour extra dry time. In all likelihood, it's not dry. When people keep telling me, yo, you just push the button, walk away, why are you doing all the checking? Because the machine is easily fooled. It doesn't know what I loaded it with. It's assuming, the programming is assuming that since the temperature is up and the pressure is down, that it's driven off the moisture. And that would be true if all 4 trays were loaded with the same product and it's a product that the moisture comes out easily. If it's unpunctured blueberries, the moisture's coming out extremely slowly, and it has no way of knowing that I put unpunctured blueberries in it. It's going to assume that I put an average type of product in there. If you're using a commercial machine and you set it for the drying recipe or program for a specific set of tray or a specific set of food loaded a specific way and a specific amount, well, then you could trust it because it knows what to expect. It knows the parameters of what's in there, and so therefore the drying curve or the time that it should take and the temperatures and pressures that it should see. It has no idea what we've loaded it with or how we've loaded it. We've loaded it with fairly tall stack of beans in small blocks. Since there's no air in there, the only heat that can hit the beans are the conduction heat from the tray below and some radiant coming up from it, and the radiant from the heater above it. The beans in the middle are completely shielded, so they're going to get extremely little radiant heat either direction, so they're going to have to rely on the top beans getting hot and transmitting the heat through it through conduction, and the tray conducting up through the beans this way. But the program has no way of knowing that that's what I've loaded in those trays. So it's looking for an average set of parameters to tell it that it's dry. Well, it's easily fooled. Let's get it out and start the dry check process to find out how far along it is. It's already hours past when it says it should have been done. Okay, the down arrow past the rest of the time. We'll open the drain valve. We'll get them out, starting with tray 1. It's 9:55. And I'm going to put it back in the machine in the same position because I want the beans to stay on those 2 spots. Now that it's partially freeze-dried, I'm going to see if I can stick a thermometer in there.
Taxi!
Okay. So that'll give us some more data to see how it's doing. So I'll put that one back in there and get tray 2. And I need to make sure that I'm going to lose some of those bean placements. Shucks, I should have put dividers in. I'm going to kind of push them. Wow, a huge difference in looks. So 1007, that's a huge difference in the way they look. I wonder if I can kind of nestle this in there now. I don't know if that's useful at this point, because they could be completely done. I mean, of course, that's what we're hoping for. I'm going to put that back, and again, I'm going to put that at the same spot. And tray 3, 990, and we'll get those back in there. And that thermometer, now that it's in the middle of the beans, is only about 70 degrees, and this one's 85 and dropping, and that's about 74 degrees. So what that tells us so far is that they are not warm enough to have come out. If I'd had a thermometer in that yogurt to begin with, well, or in those beans, and showing less than the 120 degrees that it's set for, I wouldn't have taken them out because they're not fully dry. All of the primary freeze drying has probably been done. All of the liquid water that was ice is probably gone. But the secondary drying hasn't finished yet. We have to try to remove some of that bound water to make sure that it's still not in there. And let's see what we've got. So that's down to 80. That's down to 68 now. And this is about 74 still. It's not warm enough to take them out yet, in my opinion. Okay, we'll restart it, give it at least 3 hours because I have other things to do. If I'd had thermometers in there to begin with, I would have waited until they were up to the 120 degree that I have it set for before I ever tested them. Then I've got a strong likelihood of them being dry the first time I do the test. We'll get it restarted. So I've got the drain valve closed. I'm gonna put more dry time. It reminds me to close the drain valve. It is. And start. I've put 4 hours on the timer, and I won't bother checking it until that top thermometer, well, till all of the thermometers are up to temperature. These in the beans need to be at least 120. That top and bottom tray spot are always colder, so I need at least 110, and they need to have been there for at least a couple hours. So if I come and peek at it in a couple hours and they're all up to temperature, then I'll know that in a couple more hours it's worth checking. Otherwise, it's still not worth checking. Again, it's an example of the machine is easy to fool. It doesn't matter if you have the new software, the old software, it doesn't matter. The machine is easy to fool. So it cannot know if it's all the way dry every time. Now, if you load yours evenly with the same product every time, you will know if yours is going to be done because you'll have a history on that product with that machine loaded that way. But otherwise, there's no way when you randomly put stuff in there, you can't trust the machine to know because it cannot know. We'll be back in a little while and check it. So I'm finally back. It's been just a little over 4 hours. I had to add a few more minutes on it so that it would still be running when I came to check it. Anyway, yeah, I've been sidetracked with some other projects. So I'm doing less freeze drying right now. Got a bunch of 3D printing for number one child, and mostly I've been working on changing our minivan into a camping minivan so I can take it and go camping again. So I've got that on the second channel if you're interested in seeing any of that progress, which is slow because I'm slow at things. Now we'll get the rest of this time off of here and we'll get them out and check them. Let's see, it's showing about 110 degrees on the bottom beans, so rack space 3, 100 and about 14 on the second one, and the yogurt only shows about 95 still. I expect that top one to be a little less, but 95 is still pretty low. So open the drain valve and get them out. Okay, I'll start at tray 1 with the yogurt again. Okay, and it's 943. No, it's a solid 943 right now. So in 4 hours, it's gone down 12 grams, and that would be, there's about 200 grams of the food on there. So that's 6%. Yeah, that's 6% water came out of there by weight. Of course, those will go back in. Exactly where will depend on the beans. Okay, so these, and this is tray 2, It's $9.99. So it's gone down 8 grams. And this would be about 250 grams of food on here. 8 grams, so about, what, 3%? But look at the difference on these. This had 1 teaspoon of salt, and they're just blown apart. This had 3 teaspoons of salt, and they look quite whole still. 2 teaspoons of salt. There's a huge difference between these. How interesting. I don't know if they'll be edible because that's a lot of salt in there, but I'm wondering if it will wash out. But they have to go back in for a little while longer to make sure that they really were done. Tray 3 and 983, and that's down by 7 grams. So again, about 250 grams of product on there, 7 grams. So what'd that be? About 3%, 2.5%, 3%. We'll get them back in there, give them a couple more hours to make sure that they're dry now. I suspect they're dry now because the temperatures were back, or were up to about what I would expect. It's likely they could be dry now. So according to the machine, they were dry about 8 hours ago as far as freeze-dry time goes. And as I just demonstrated, they weren't dry. The machine has no way of knowing if what you put in there is dry. If you do a standardized sample, it can probably tell if it's dry. But if you load miscellaneous things in there, it has no way of telling if it's dry. Because of the methodology it's using, it's impossible for this machine to tell if it's dry. Or the new machine like my sister's machine. It's impossible for it to tell if it's dry. All it can tell is if I put this much heat into it, what happens to the pressure? And if I sample that gases in there, what is the percentage or what are the parameters of that? It still doesn't tell me if the food is dry because it may not be able to get it out of there the way the machine expects, because it may be loaded tall. It may be unpunctured blueberries. It may be citrus with all those little cellular structure, the juicicles. It can't know what you put in it, so it can't tell if it's dry. If it had a specific set of programming for each exact kind of food and amount, then yes, it could assess that and be really close. These don't do that. We'll add at least 2 more hours and check it again. So I'm going to go more dry time, close the drain valve. I did. Continue. And I'll put it to 3 hours. And I'll try to remember to come back in 2 or so hours and check it. So don't go away, it'll be just a second. Okay, we're back to check these. It's 3 hours later because I couldn't make it back in 2 or 2.5. I did come down and check, kind of went through the area at about an 1.5-hour time frame, and the thermometers were up finally. These two currently say, so the beans, the warmer trays, this says just over 120, this says about 126, so they're both over 120, and the top one's at 110, which when the machine is set for 120, the top tray rarely gets over 110. And same with the bottom tray, it rarely gets over 110 when the machine's set for 120. The middle two usually go to about 125, maybe even peak slightly higher than that. Now with those temperatures, it's worth checking again. They probably were done last time, so fingers crossed they didn't lose any weight during those 3 hours. If they didn't lose any weight, that means they were done 3 hours ago. And sometimes there's some confusion on me saying about the temperatures and them being done or not. I do not use the temperatures to tell me that they are done. The temperature cannot tell me that it's done. It can only tell me it's worth starting the check. And it can tell me that it cannot be done. So if the machine says that they're almost done, and a thermometer in the middle of the food says it's still 0 degrees, I know it cannot be done. The fact that it's up to the 120 and has been there for over an hour suggests strongly that it's probably done. But I would never rely on the temperature to tell me something's done. Okay, so we'll bypass the rest of the time that I'd added and get them out and check them. So open the drain valve. And starting at the top with the yogurt again. And 942. So only a single gram on a type of food that gives up its moisture pretty easily in 3 hours. I'm going to call that done. That means it was essentially done 3 hours ago, or within 1 gram of it. So tray 2. 998, same situation, a single gram in 3 hours. I'm going to accept that with this type of food product and how dry they were. And tray 3. And again, 1 single gram, 982. Okay, so with a single gram on each one in 3 hours, I'm happy with that. I'm going to go ahead and turn the machine off with no defrost. The timer on the machine is showing 33 hours, and with the older machine, that's the total time that it was running. I'm backing that up to 30 hours because we know that it had essentially no loss during the last 3 hours, and it would have been safe to have bagged them 3 hours ago. It was not safe the previous check. So they did lose weight on the earlier one. This latest one is small enough that I wouldn't be concerned anymore. I don't like anything more than 0, but I also know from all of our previous batches that if we did another 2 hours, it's unlikely to have any drop left. So we're good to go on that. If it was still showing a curve of diminishing returns, if it was still showing a incremental water amount coming out, so last time it was 8 and this time it was 5, I would have gone again. We'll get this set for defrost.
Yeehaw!
So I'm not sure what batch is going to be next. I have nothing set right now. I have a list of things I'm supposed to have done, including some number 10 cans that are waiting to be done. But right now I'm more focused on doing some of the minivan work and changing that so I can go camping with it and bring some of the food. Now let's go over to the bagging area and see those beans. So get the weights on these without the thermometers so I can just confirm the final weights. And this yogurt one is the only one that's going to be getting stored. The others are all going to be used for testing. All of these beans are going to be bagged in Ziplocs and then put into a Mylar bag until we get to the testing. So even if it's only going to be 1 day, I'll get them into that bag just to make sure that they don't get any more moisture in them. But there's huge differences in this. This is very interesting. So this was 3 teaspoons of salt in this batch. So I've got the bags labeled, and I did a crummy job because I wasn't paying attention. I was just altering another label I already had that was had a different instructions on how to use it. So I just crossed out the parts that don't pertain to doing yogurt. As I almost always do, I'm using the 7 mil Mylar bags. I just figure I've gone through all the time and expense to get the food, to freeze dry it, do everything else. I'm going to use a heavy bag on it. The exceptions is I would probably consider a 5 mil bag if I knew for sure that I was going to just bring it on a trip or it's short-term storage kind of thing. These are the only two that are being bagged for storage. I'm going to go ahead and add oxygen absorbers to those and get them sealed. Okay, sealed very high up on the bag. There's room for 2 or 3 more tries in case I mess it up, or if I want to open it and use some. So those are ready for storage. Now these are a completely different thing, because these are all just for testing. So I have no plans on storing any of these. So my plan is to try to rehydrate each set of these, see how they come out as far as how whole, and see if it pulls enough salt out to make them still edible, because some of this has a lot of salt, or at least the water did, so I don't know how much got absorbed. So I'm going to put each set in a bag and keep the little tag with it, so I'll know what it is. Can I do it on the outside? Well, I could staple it on or tape it on. Maybe I'll tape it on. Then it doesn't have to be inside. And maybe I can get back to the testing, because I had plenty of things to test. I didn't even get to anything with acids in it to see how much that affects it, because this was just salt, because I'd read somewhere that that can make a difference with keeping them whole. But I know acids will keep them from getting softened, and so I was just wondering if that would also keep them together during freeze drying. And never got around to testing that. So this one's only a ½ teaspoon of salt. Okay, so that one was no salt. Huge difference between the no salt and even a ½ teaspoon of salt. And this one had 2 teaspoons of salt and 2 teaspoons of sugar. I don't want any of these to absorb any moisture or anything else until we can do the testing. So I'm going to go ahead and put them all into a 1 gallon Mylar bag. Okay, that'll fit. And I'll go ahead and put an oxygen absorber in that, because I don't know when I'm actually going to do these. I plan to do these very soon, maybe tomorrow, probably not, because I'm working on that van project. I'm going to put 2 of the 300s in there. Kind of squeeze out the extra air. All right, so those are ready for storage, and these are ready to rehydrate and test and see how they hold together while we're trying them out. And since that's what this video is about, I'll continue on this one. These will just go away. I'm finally going to cut the bag back open and do a small rehydration test. Let's go ahead and cut this open and check it out. For you, it's just been a few seconds on the video since I finished the previous step. For me, it's been a month and a half. Okay, so this is the 1 teaspoon of salt one, 3 teaspoons of salt, kind of sorting them out. 2 teaspoons of salt, no salt. Oh, ½ teaspoon. I forgot which things I'd even done. Just gonna put them in order. And then 2 teaspoons of salt and 2 teaspoons of sugar. I don't know how. I mean, ideally, I suppose I should empty the entire bag on a plate or something and look at every bit of it. I'm going to pour them all out onto here. So you can see the skins on almost every single one of them are kind of curled up. Some of them are split open. Virtually every one of them looks like the skins have peeled, and that may be true for everything. I guess we'll just take a small sample and put it in here to compare. So we'll just kind of mix them and then get a small scoop of them. That's enough to, I think, try it out. And I don't know if that's truly representative of what's in here. And the rest of those I'll put back in the bag for further testing if this Doesn't tell me what I want to know. I'll just go through all of them real quick. I think they sound a little different. That's definitely very similar to those as far as how they're kind of broken up a bit and the skins are loose or falling off. So again, do the same thing. And I'm not going to worry about the fact that I'm not having exact same quantities. I think that won't matter for this particular testing, because then we want to see how they firm up or not. And I know I mentioned before that these thin bags are not worthless, just close to worthless for keeping moisture out and oxygen. And that's why I put it in the Mylar bag. Whoa, there is tons of, that's a lot of dust on that sample. This was the 1 teaspoon of salt. I assume I didn't mix anything up, because these look far worse than those did. Okay, so maybe they hold together well to begin with, but they come apart completely later. Well, I might powder these up anyway to make refried beans. Yeah, those are very broken up. Those actually look and sound better than the previous one. 3 teaspoons of salt. And of course, the salt was in the water. Most of it isn't in the beans anymore. Those are definitely the best looking so far. Almost no powdered ones. That looks pretty good, but again, there might be too much salt. And I might buy some calcium chloride so I wouldn't have to use the sodium chloride. I'm just adding a towel here to rest these on so it doesn't lose so much heat into the table, or damage the table for that matter. I'm going to go ahead and just add hot water to each one of these. And then we'll cover them kind of lightly because I don't have any covers that actually fit tight. And I'm using boiling water, or just under boiling, I suppose. It's 100 or 205. I'm going to let those sit a good long time, and then we'll come back and compare them. I have no idea how they're going to do. Well, let's see what they look like and what they are. Beans. Beans. So this one's, they look like beans. This one is just water, no salt or anything. And then the various amounts. Okay, so you want a taste test? I think they're going to be terrible. At least some of them. This one, yeah, well, that looks good. There's one good bean out there. I did not do them all, obviously. I figured it wasn't really worth doing. And I really think that I could do some good bean dip, or something like that. Oh, it's a bean. Kind of soft bean. Oh, at least that one has flavor. Even a half teaspoon of salt makes a huge difference in flavor. Okay, so that bean kind of blew apart, and it's soft and mushy. I think I need to buy some calcium chloride. It helps keep canned fruits and vegetables, or I don't know, beans, pickles, firm. So it's in pickles. I don't know if it's in olives, but it's in pickles. It's in canned beans. Oh, that was quite nice. Oh, that's actually pretty good and not overly salty or anything. So this is 2 teaspoons. That's salty. I could rinse that, and that would probably take away a lot of the saltiness. Those look really nice, and by the time you get to 2 or 3 teaspoons of salt, they are holding together nicely. Especially this, the 3 teaspoons, it's just too much salt. So 3 teaspoons of salt, the texture is great. It's too salty. I wonder if I could rinse some of that salt out. Okay, the texture with the salt and sugar is not near as good. I think I need to try some calcium chloride, which is what they put in cans of beans. I really like the look of those. I mean, you can compare them. They didn't blow up as much, so these absorbed a lot of water. These did not. The difference between the 2 teaspoons of salt and the 3 is quite remarkable. I mean, these are salty, but they're nice and firm. I like those. However, they are salty. So I'm going to try rinsing the salt out of it a bit, add some water, and just clear water, see if that does a good job. For now, I think I'll just store these back in the bag and figure out what else to experiment with them. But that's all I wanted to go over now, was just, do they work to this extent? And 3 teaspoons of salt in that original batch worked well, but it is salty. Well, this one, I just added more water, poured out the water, added more water, jiggle it around a little, and the water is salty already. So I think it's going to pull out enough salt. So even after rinsing, that's a bit salty, but it's good texture and nice flavor. It's just a bit on the salty side. So maybe if I rinse them, maybe I'll try those, because those were definitely the best. So this 3 teaspoons of salt in there was definitely the best texture. I really liked it. So I think I'll take this pack and just soak it in water for a while and see if that will pull out enough salt to make it usable in different dishes. I'm real happy with overall, though, the fact that it's got good texture. These are just mushy still. Yeah, not interested in those. Those are good. And I think I'll buy a bit of calcium chloride and check it out. One final revisit of these beans. So these are the ones that had the 3 teaspoons of salt in the original small batch, and they did well. They were salty. So I rinsed them a few times, let them sit in the refrigerator, and changed the water out about three or four times, I think. I'm gonna dump this out. After rinsing them 4 times, okay, they stayed nice and whole. The saltiness pretty much went away. In fact, they're kind of plain and boring again. So that definitely did work. So if you're willing to rinse them a few times, the saltiness is gone and they're still nice and firm. So that's one possibility. Anyway, we'll do some more experiments later. I think I'll get some calcium chloride later and try some more beans. I'm real happy with how well these stayed whole. They stayed whole, they stayed firm. I'm real pleased with those.
Snacking on them?
I'm trying to snack on them evenly.
And are you also keeping track of whether or not the ones you snack on are whole or split?
Oh my gosh, that's delicious. Only whole. Okay. I wouldn't snack on a split one because they're crap.
Now you have to snack on some of all the others.
I'm here. I'm here. And now I have these 2 left.
Which one's the best one?
Well, this is the worst one.
Okay.
I don't know which one the best one is, but that one, no salt and no salt.
No salt, no sugar.
It's boring.
Water.
Oh, this looks really nice. And then the next test will be freeze drying them, though, to see if they will hold up. See, and that one was
the liquid or drain the liquid.
I'm going to drain it. So I see them that are in 2 pieces, but they're not exploded, and that's a difference.
That one.
I think I do like they can the beans with the liquid.
That's good. Yes, because it's still, you can see the individual halves. The exposed ones, they're starting to deteriorate. They're starting to fall apart into mush.
Okay.
They'd be perfect for refried beans still.
Yeah, you just pre-mush them.
Yes. But, oh, these with salt on them, they're so yummy. That is...
It's a bean. That's it.
And this one has salt and sugar.
Oh, you could have just used these.
I thought about microwave, and I thought, yeah, it's going to be so bad.
As long as you keep it nice and low and make sure you top up the water regularly, they won't melt too much.
I'm not sure that would be a way. Yeah, you can see how it's kind of mushing.
Yeah.
But overall, that's not a bad bean.
Okay.
Does that have sugar and salt?
Mm-hmm. Don't really taste the sugar.
So what about these that there's like...
I wasn't sure about ovening those. I wasn't sure if those would be oven safe or not. I assume they probably are.
But
There's only one way to find out.
Well, there's more than one way. One would be to ask the manufacturer.
There's only one good, interesting way to find out.
Well, that's true. Okay, so I'm going to let those cool, and then I'm going to leave them in liquid, refrigerate them, and then go from there. And I still need to do a whole nother set of these. Once I figure out which is the best for salt, then I want to try a variation with acids of some kind. So either tomato, lemon juice, vinegar, something to add an acid that's supposed to keep them from getting soft to begin with. And I know from my times that I've done chili, you can really go wrong with that.
Did you count them yet?
No, I did not. But I figure if I take one of each, if any...
Oh,
if
I'm counting how many were broken.
Oh, no, I didn't.
Okay.
But I can just...
Interesting to count them now and then count them after the freeze dried to see if they change.
that would be a great idea.
But you don't count them.
And maybe if I see any significant difference, I'll do the experiment with different areas of them and find out. What do you think so far?
That one doesn't have much salt. That one I just had was way too salty.
Oh, well, they get more.
Oh yeah. Those two, I think, were the best.
For flavor.
For flavor.
Yeah. What about consistency?
They were all, consistency-wise, I think they were all pretty close.
Well, that first one to me seemed a bit on the mushier side by
maybe
comparison with the others.
I was so focused on taste, I don't recall the mushiness.
Yeah, I thought by the time you got into this range that these didn't make much difference as far as mushiness.
Right,
They
they
just
were
got too salty.
Exactly.
Though this one I thought was surprisingly not as much salty as that one. Though they have the same amount of salt, but this one also has sugar.
Oh, okay, yeah, because that one, the one seemed very salty. Not sure which one I liked.
Yeah, they
I'm
get
guessing
pretty.
it's this one.
Yeah, it gets pretty salty. See, I like salty, so I didn't mind too much. And I was wondering what would happen if you put it in a whole pot of chili and don't add any salt.
Yeah, these seem a bit more
Crunchy,
Not-
firm?
firm, yeah.
Yeah.
Or maybe crunchy.
Yeah,
Compared to these, which are a little bit more fally apart.
right.
Like crumbly.
Yeah. Well, this one you can visually see a color difference between,
Yes.
you know,
Although I think this one's even softer without falling apart yet.
right. I think the,
Salt and vinegar.
right, so these have the same amount of salt, but this one has some sugar too.
Yeah, that
That's
the salt and sugar
surprisingly-
seems to be a little bit
Yeah,
better.
yeah. The surprising to me that it doesn't seem as salty as the other one that has just as much salt.
Yeah, but they're a little bit more soft, but not to the point where they're starting to crumble.
Right. Yeah, so, and I'll have to try, so I'm not going to worry too much about checking them now to see how they do as they freeze dry, because they're all going to go through the same process. So I just want to know who ends up the best at the end.
Yes.
Start with that sample and work from there.
Yeah, and as far as flavor goes, you can always change it later,
Yes.
or you can add more salt.
And now that I think about it, I was thinking I should, maybe I'll just use the cans because there's so many variables involved. I'm already adding 6 variables here. So I was thinking of splitting these in half yet again and putting them in the freeze dryer in 2 different batch, because I was wondering what would happen if I freeze dry at a much lower temperature.
Yeah.
Instead of 120 like I normally do. The factory setting is 125 for the current machines, I believe. We went to 120 with Judy's because I was using 120 because that's what it used to be. I'm wondering what would happen to go down to like 90, 80.
Yeah.
Go very, very slow at first. It'd take a long time, but the goal is whole beans.
Yes.
So time won't really matter.
Right, that's a secondary issue that you could work with. You know, so maybe I should split these in half yet again, or just go with a lower temperature, because lower temperatures in general are more delicate or better, and then see which one works best and then start from that point.
Yeah, 'cause I think you do want to do at least a comparison of, once you find out which one you like the best.
Right.
Do that again at a very high temperature and a very low
Right,
temperature.
because I could get that bag over there, that's at 120. It's essentially the same as that sample right there,
Okay.
except I didn't overcook these as badly as I overcooked those. I'm pretty sure that's a fact. I'm going to grab one of the,
Pretty sure that's a thing?
yeah.
That would affect.
Yes, I didn't, boy, those juice being wet and watery. Wow. It's not really horribly mushy, but it's wet. Okay. So, and I did add just a little splash of vinegar in that last night before I put it in the refrigerator, because I was worried about it keeping absorbing water. And I can taste the vinegar in that. I'm really kind of surprised. Okay. So I'm not sure if I should split this up into 2 groups or not. Well, I've got plenty of beans. I can always figure out if any of these do well and then work from there.
Yeah.
And I could definitely try a lower temperature to see if that helps any. Yeah. And I could always do the canned beans and do multiple temperatures with that. Okay, so these are going to the freeze dryer for pre-freezing, and we'll work on it from there.
They're going to the freezer for pre-freezing.
Oh yeah, now these are going to the freezer for pre-freezing.